Well, I think your analysis was very straight-lined. History doesn't run in a straight line.
Kid, you cannot tell your neighbor he is stealing ducks when you are stealing frogs.
As High Commissioner, I was wrong. As Charandas Prasad, I reacted naturally how any person would have.
I did not come here for that kind of abuse. I did not come here for that kind of abuse. If you're going to go down that road, I'll walk off.
But it's all okay once they're talking. If they were talking, I could not have been here today.
You got ADHD. I got that.
Calm down.
I think I've done enough in terms of taking our team out of trouble from losing.
Come on, Lou, Taylor. You got screwed. I'm reading the script now, and the first person that comes to my mind to play a detective,
Yes,
but
the
an
Guyanese
erratic
Michael
detective
Rodriguez.
is Michael Rodriguez.
Why an African slap an Indian? Why a man and slap a woman? Look, girl, how you deal with that? You deal with that.
We must encourage platforms like this because it brings together different people and allows for discussions to take place in our country on a multiplicity of fundamental issues.
Then you apologizing for something you think I did is wrong. I don't want you to do that, and you should not have done that. Hi there. Welcome to the Freddie Kissoon Show with co-host. I made a mistake again the last time. I gotta get accustomed to Leonard Craig. And I just like to read out Leonard Craig's curriculum vitae for you to show our viewers or tell our viewers about his intellectual standing. Leonard Craig has a first degree from the University of Guyanese in economics, a master's in economics from the Berlin School of Economics, and went to China to do his PhD from the Harbin Institute of Technology, a doctorate in international trade. That's our co-host, Leonard Craig. Now, our guest this evening, I don't think anybody will disagree with the word iconic being used in front of him. This is a man, I think, that no one will disagree. A person of intense integrity. Our guest this evening is a man whose name has gone into the history books. And one time when he was our guest, I said, if the order of democracy is being awarded in this country, then I will raise my pen and voice for him to be high up on the list. Since the last election, Dominic Gaskin has become an intellectual in his own right, a first degree in economics and a master's in international banking and finance. Without further ado, our guest is the iconic Dominic Gaskin. Dominic, thanks for being here. I hope as we come down to election, we'll have more of your thoughts.
Thank you.
You know this man very well.
Yes, your old colleagues.
Can we start with the anticipation in the society that elections is next year? I heard Vice President Jagdeo say something around November, but Leonard Craig told me it also could be before. But I'd like to start with what everyone viewing this program would say. Why don't you ask him that? And I'll ask him now. There's a new leadership in the AFC, and the AFC seem to be all over the place, either campaigning or getting to know the diaspora and Guyana. What's your thoughts on the new leadership? New leadership could be questioned because all the names and faces are people from the past 10 years.
Thanks again, Freddie. I want to do something slightly rude and deflect or defer the first question and just address the first thing you said, which was elections next year. And I think the Vice President did say that elections would be held in October or November of next year. But I couldn't help thinking when I listened to the President's address to Parliament yesterday that it sounded a bit like a budget presentation. And that got me thinking, well, why would the President be making a budget presentation to Parliament in October of this year? And that got me thinking a little further. Perhaps it is because he's planning to dissolve Parliament before the actual budget is presented to call an early election. So I just want to flag that possibility. It's all in my mind and there's nothing wrong with it. That's politics. It would be strategic. But I just thought when you said November or next year that it could actually be earlier. And to me, yesterday's presentation might be an indicator of that. But getting back to your question about the AFC, I think the new leader of AFC is a wise choice for the party. I hope to see the party actually participate independently in the next election and not as part of a coalition. And in that light, I think the party has a very good chance of winning or getting back to where it was in terms of its parliamentary strength, around 2011, which was the last election it took place, it participated in as an independent party. So, and my thinking in that regard is that I think Nigel is likely to take more votes from the opposition electorate than the PPP's, let's say, traditional base. And that might be enough to put them back, as I said, to where they were in 2011, which I think would be a good thing going forward for the AFC, because it means that it's an independent party on its own and it has, a decent parliamentary strength for a small third party. So that's my view, just on the surface of it.
Welcome again. Are you still active, or do you participate at all in AFC's new attempt at growth?
No, I am not an active member of any political party. I am not a supporter of any political party. I don't even know who I will vote for in the next election. I haven't given it enough thought. I'm still waiting to see, what the party's campaign looks like, what their manifestos are like. So I am independent. No, I said since I withdrew from the party, that's it. I'm not interested in party politics anymore. I also said at the time that, in my view, the coalition lost two elections at the same time. They lost the 2020 election. And because of what took place after that election, I think they lost the 2025 election in advance. And I still hold that view, not with any malice or anything. It's just my view. I don't think they can recover from what happened in 2020 in the 2025 election. So I think the PPP will win that election simply because of what took place in 2020. But I'm not involved with any political party.
Okay. Has the AFC approached you at all to participate?
No. I chat with people from time to time. I have good relations with people, but I have not been involved in any discussion about my party.
I just want to come in before Leonard come in. But I know you're a modest person, and I know your reaction to what I'm about to say. But if they're going to get any traction, I think you're going to be indispensable to them. I mean, when people hear the name Dominic Gaskin, there's nothing negative they can say about you. I mean, you have just established yourself the past 4 years as a man of integrity, as a courageous man who believes meticulously in principles, and those principles should be adhered to. Now, if you could have such a person in the AFC, I don't think there are others in the AFC that can pull that achieve that traction as you. Now, surely in the coming months, Nigel or someone has to say what I've just said to you. What will be your reaction?
Well, I think you're exaggerating quite a bit. And you're even, getting into the realm of fantasy. But
I know you're being modest.
No, like I said, I am not. I have my views on the outcome of the next election and why that outcome will occur, and that precludes me from any sort of active support for the AFC or any opposition party, and even the government or the current ruling party. Because if I say that I believe that the next election is going to result in another victory for the PPP because of XYZ, why am I wasting my time getting involved in a campaign with a predetermined result? That's my view. It's only my view. But I can't hold that opinion and then still want to go and support a party or be actively involved in a campaign that I don't believe is heading anywhere.
But I think political activism is bigger than that, because it's not who you convince will win that should generate your interest in participating in a party. Because, for example, all of us are involved in the AFC, and I don't think realistically we thought that AFC could win, and I'm talking about before 2015, but we still participated based on certain principles. So you being convinced that another party, and even vocalizing it, I don't think that should preclude your participation. I don't know if that's a persuasion.
It's not a persuasion. I mean, the point is taken, but maybe I should go a step further. I think because of what took place in 2020, which I didn't want to, rehash.
Okay.
I think the AFC and the PNC, and I guess all the members of APNU, need to demonstrate to the public that they are prepared to recognize the will of the people in the next election. They don't have to, it's up to them. But that, to me, would be the basis for me to even consider supporting any of those parties again. Because, like I said, I felt strongly about what happened in 2020. I'm hoping that nothing similar takes place in 2025, and that the current opposition, is prepared, whatever the outcome of the election is, to recognize it as the legitimate will of the people. I'm not saying if there is some discrepancy or irregularity that they can't, by way of an election petition or whatever the legally prescribed process is, raise an objection. But I'm saying, don't lose the election and then take to the streets and then try to discredit the entire election, because Guyanese participate in elections. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people go out there and they cast their vote. And they cast their vote with the expectation that their vote will be recognized, and the totality of those votes will be recognized in determining who is the next, who forms the next government. And to participate in that process and then discredit it because you didn't win. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I'm saying that that is what I don't want to see happen. And that will form the basis of how I feel about the current opposition parties going forward. I think if they can get through the next elections and reestablish themselves as adhering to, the electoral process and democratic principles or whatever, then I can reconsider, not necessarily being a supporter of those parties, but then I can then I think they would have demonstrated that they are capable of winning an election, because I think the public, not just me, I think the public wants to see them sort of walk back or redeem themselves. And I don't like using that in strong terms because it sounds judgmental, but I think they need to redeem themselves in the next election, because Guyana needs a political opposition that is capable of winning an election. And I think the public out there is looking at the current opposition to see if that is something they can ever do again. And I think what happens at, the outcome of the next elections and how the opposition responds to that outcome will go a long way in determining whether these are parties or these are participants that the public can trust again and put their confidence in going forward.
All right. I'm going on something you said earlier, that the PPP will win, in your estimation, simply because of the election fiasco, if we use that term. Are you negating any sort of performance in office during these 5 years that the current incumbent will win simply because democratic principles were eroded in 2020? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, not a good question. Yeah, right. So it's not just about what took place in 2020. I think if we look at the results of the last election, we have to look at those results and start from there, and then say what has happened between the 2020 election and now that would change the result of the last election. So what has happened? Well, I think an important thing that has happened was what took place after that election. So the PPP got 50.6% of the votes in that election. I think the coalition lost, I can't put a number to it, but a considerable amount of votes, potential votes, after the election in that 5-month period. From then now, so there's this deficit. What has the PPP done so badly that it could cancel out or offset that deficit? Or what has the opposition done so well? How have they performed well enough to offset that deficit that they started out with? And to me, I haven't seen the opposition performing well enough to offset, that deficit. The PPP, on the other hand, they've had oil money to spend. I think they've done a good job in spending that money in ways that people respond to, and that has continued up to yesterday. And for that reason, I think they are likely to win the election. So it is not just about the 2020 election, but I think that was a major factor in the outcome of the next election. And I don't think that, based on the performance of the two parties, that deficit has been erased.
What's I know Freddie asked you your opinion on Nigel Hughes, but what's your opinion on the person Aubrey Norton and your confidence in his ability to do some of the things you just mentioned, as well as maintain opposition support to whatever extent? How do you view his outfit? And also, if you can comment on your take on Aubrey Norton winning a motion that says, long beforehand, before you can determine the pulse, the political pulse of the country, that he must be the presidential candidate. And how do you see, well, you said you prefer AFC go as a independent party to the elections, but how do you see it working out an AFC presidential candidate in a coalition with the PNC? 3 questions.
Yes. So the last question first. I still think AFC should go alone. I think it needs to go alone to reestablish.
If it gets the presidential.
Even if it gets the presidential candidacy, I think it badly needs to reestablish itself or its strength as an independent party. Because failing that, you open the door for all sorts of speculation as to what the real strength of the party is, what it brings to the table in terms of votes, and people can say anything, as was done, during our second negotiation of the Cummingsburg Accord, when it was suggested that the AFC has little or no electoral strength and brings very little to the table. So I think it needs to reestablish itself as a political force. In terms of Mr. Norton, difficult. When he first won the leadership of the PNC, I thought it was a good thing. He's a grassroots politician, and he was not a minister or parliamentarian in the previous government, which I thought was good, and gave him an opportunity to maybe, present a fresh face for his party. Unfortunately, I don't think he rose to the occasion. I think it became clear that a lot of his battles were within his party, to the extent that there were persons opposing him for the leadership the second time around, which was earlier this year. And that didn't end well in terms of how that turned out. I don't know the inner workings of the PNC. I was told by someone who I know well that the elections were free and fair, and that it went without any hiccups, contrary to what we read in the media. I don't know what the truth is, but the bottom line is that at this point, I think Mr. Norton is probably not the most electable personality in the PNC, and it's without prejudice to him. You have to always look at the bigger picture. Who among you is most likely or is likely to get the most votes out there? And I don't think it is Mr. Norton for a variety of reasons. And so that's my take on him.
Dominic, can you take us through the variables, permutations, and configurations of how this party, with a new leader called the AFC, could penetrate the electorate to revert to its pristine self in 2005-2011 when it won 5, 6, 7 seats? How could that be done, given the fact that it's facing ubiquitous criticism since it entered office in 2015? I just like to know if you can outline for us how those votes are going to come and why they're going to come to the AFC.
I think it's simple. Let's say the current parliamentary opposition, or at least the APNU AFC party in that opposition, because there is, the one seat that went to the joinder parties. I think they are good for, they won 47% of the vote in the last election, right? Assuming they're good for, let's say, 45% of the vote, or even if we say 40% of the vote in the next election, which I think is very, very conservative, we're still looking at a lot of votes. You're looking at over 200,000 votes. I think Nigel Hughes is very popular among the support base of the coalition, even in opposition. I think he's probably more popular than Mr. Norton. And I notice Dr. David Hines threw his hat in the ring as the WPA presidential candidate. I think Nigel is more popular than him too. It's just my gut feeling. People may have other opinions, but based on what I have seen, I think Nigel is quite popular within that support base. And I think he can take votes from within that grouping, sufficient to get, I don't know, I don't want to put a number to it because anybody could throw numbers out, but I don't see 5 seats or even more being an impossible task. It all depends on the campaign that both parties run and who actually becomes the presidential candidate, because right now we have Nigel Hughes, the leader of the AFC. He has not declared himself the presidential candidate. And Mr. Norton has he been officially anointed the candidate? Or
there was a motion saying he will be, and if he is not, he determines.
So he will be.
Yeah, there was a motion to that and it was carried.
So there's still room for him to determine that maybe there's someone else who could be a stronger candidate. So if the AFC can, chip away at PNC support and get 5 parliamentary seats, and then moving forward, if the AFC proves itself to be a responsible party post-election, when the election results are announced, and works very hard during the next parliament to regain its electoral strength, and specifically among Indo-Guyanese voters between 2025 and 2030, I think it can, by 2030, get back to where it was, let's say, in 2011. Now, that's a lot of ifs, and it will take a lot of work, consistent work, and very few missteps. And I'm not suggesting that will naturally happen, but those are the ifs and those are the possibilities, and we can't rule them out. So that is how I would answer your question. If those things happen, then AFC can regain its position. But like I said, it will take a lot of work.
Before Leonard come in, this was so pressing on my mind that I'll ask Leonard to give way to me. Dominic, you have a singer, and this singer is very popular with his stage performance. The backup singers, the support staff. And 5 years after he goes on stage, and those backstage singers are not what it was in the earlier times. And people going to say, man, this is what he become 5 years after. Is it not possible people are going to say, look, aren't these the same people? Dominique, the reality of this country, we just hope it wasn't the reality, but it's the reality. When you form a political party and you contest an election, people always want to know who's your Indian and who's your African arm. Good. Now, the AFC had the election. Leader, African Guyanese. Deputy leader, chairman, David Patterson, African Guyanese. Deputy chairman, African Guyanese, Carrington. General Secretary, African Guyanese. But this was a party that presented itself enormously, prodigiously as the multiracial political party of the beginning of the 21st century, 2005, 2006. Now, look at its image. It went to meet the diaspora, and it has a photograph with itself meeting members of the State Department. And there was only one Indian in the mix-up. And you can't say he's an AFC. That's I can't remember his name. It's a guy who lived past 50 years outside. Nobody in Guyana knows him. Where are the Indian faces?
You're asking me to where they are. I believe that the AFC lost a lot of its Indian support in the 2020 election or after the 2020 election, probably even leading up to the 2020 election, and probably even a little before that. I don't think it will regain much of that support before the next election. So the face that it presents in this election is not likely to regain or inspire great confidence among the Indian voters. I can't speak for Indian voters, I'm not Indian, but just based on the optics as you described, which are very important in Guyanese politics, we can't whether we like it or not, that's the reality that we live with and we have to accept it. But I don't think that that's the problem that the AFC needs to deal with in this election, because first of all, even if the AFC were to present a mixed slate, and it hasn't as yet determined who its presidential and prime ministerial candidates are, but let's suppose they come up with two candidates, one Indian, one African. I don't think that's going to make a great difference to their fortunes in the next election. So I think what is happening in the next election, and the best thing for the AFC, is really to get as much votes from the coalition support base as you can in the next election. To me, that's good politics. You have a base, you are a small member party, that relies on that base. Go get as many votes from within that base. Going forward after the election, then you can start broadening the base. And like I said, that will be more work than this particular task that faces the AFC. It's going to take a lot more work to win back the trust of the Indo-Guyanese population, but it cannot be done because we're all human and most people want what's best for Guyana, and depending on what or how the AFC presents itself post-2025, I think it can very well regain that support.
Leonard?
Something I always say, especially to you, Freddie, when you comment that AFC is practically dead and what have you. And I'd say this to most politicians. Do not underestimate machinery in an election. So once an AFC still has a remnant of a machinery throughout the country in all regions, and that normally counts for something in getting votes. The parties that never do well are the parties that doesn't have a machinery, which brings me to Anog. Using your political evaluation, how do you see Anog fitting into the political landscape and the results at the end of 2025 election?
I don't see the machinery. And I agree with you, Leno, that machinery is very, very important. Admittedly, I think we're moving into a new era, or we're in there already, where a lot can be achieved on social media. But I still think that machinery on the ground, the visibility in various parts of Guyana, the one-on-one, people knowing who in their community might be one of you or a supporter and all, I think inspires a little more confidence. It generates energy, and I think it makes a difference. So I would be surprised, maybe even pleasantly surprised, to see a party like Anog prove us wrong and show that, look, we're in a new era now, and there are other ways that you can gain support. There are issues that you can present. You can present yourself on social media. You don't have to be on the ground all the time. But when I say pleasantly surprised, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, because, you know, a lot of things happen. You know, there are dating sites on the internet that have proven disastrous for a lot of people, you know, so I still think that there's value in, you know, the personal relationships, physically going to places, having people on the ground. So I don't think we can do away with that. I'm not seeing the machinery in analog. So I can't see the 4-seat scenario playing out, because that's maybe 20 to 30,000 votes, maybe more.
4 seats to some, about 21,000 votes. It's 5,000 for a seat, yeah.
It was, remember, as
it's gone up?
The numbers are increasing.
Between 7 and 5, yeah.
Yeah, so, but whatever it is, it's a lot of votes. I mean, we know from the AFC how much work it takes to get 35,000 votes, 28,000 votes the first time around, and how integral that machinery is to actually getting those votes. And not to mention the resources required to fund or fuel that machinery to go after those votes. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of planning. It causes a lot of grief also. And I don't know, I mean, I know ANOG is currently at odds with one of his partner parties over the seat in Parliament. But I don't know how much experience ANOG has with internal party conflict, which eats up a lot of time and energy and detracts from your political purpose, but which you as a party have to deal with. And trust me, I mean, Leonard would know this, you know, you sit in a political party that has that machinery, which is a good thing, but that same machinery requires managing and sups up a lot of your energy, because human beings are, especially those who gravitate towards politics, you know, they are conflict-loving people. And so looking at a party like ANOG, I would like to see them, you know, branch out and actually develop a more national presence. And I can't say I know that they're not doing that, because I don't know enough about the party. So I'm not criticizing them. I just simply don't know what work they've been doing on the ground. But I don't see the 4-seat happening just like that. I'm not seeing the energy, visible energy that is telling me that they have that much support.
Members of the PPP often boast. We had Joe Hamilton here in our 2 programs ago, right? And
no, the last, two programs
ago. And he has said, as many PPP members have been saying, that they are making inroads into what they refer to as non-traditional areas. And one statistics that was presented by Minister Hamilton, he said, which the numbers can bear out, the PPP grew in Region 4 their new votes. Let's assume everybody got back
more
the
than
same votes.
2,000.
Right. They have increased
by 2,000.
No, the PNC increased. The coalition increased by 2,000, but the PPP increased by about 10,000.
Yeah. Oh, he said 11. Yeah.
Right. Then we come to the 2023 local government election. PPP got votes in area where they couldn't even find a candidate previously. For example, Moko Arcadia. They couldn't even find a candidate. Now they have found a full slate of candidates, plus they won a seat in the NDC. Then in New Amsterdam, Afro section of New completely the not the first past the post seat, not the proportional representation, the first past the post seat, completely in an area where you look at previous results where they couldn't even find five.
But they increased their seats in Georgetown too.
And in Georgetown. And one place in Georgetown where they got a lot of votes is Agricola, the constituency number 15. So how do you see this pattern being sustained into the next election? And how is this configuration going to work out, considering, you know, the political history that we know, voting patterns and things like that? How do you have a comment on?
Comment, yeah. First of all, I don't think local government elections generate the same level of interest as national elections. So voter turnouts tend to be low, and that could favor a certain type of campaign or whatever. Having said that, I think the PPP is doing a lot of work in, let's call it non-traditional, but let's be a little more honest, in Afro-Guyanese communities. I mean, it is very obvious that, you know, they're always in some Afro-Guyanese area doing something, cutting a ribbon for something. It's very clear that they're working hard to improve their showing in Afro-Guyanese communities. I don't believe that traditional voting patterns change quickly. I think they change, they evolve, but I don't think they change very quickly. I think, I do believe that the PPP will win more Afro-Guyanese votes in 2025 than they did in 2020. I can't put a number to that. I don't think it's going to be a huge, you know, a large amount. We saw in Georgetown in the local government elections, yes, I think the PPP improved, but it wasn't. I got the feeling that they were disappointed in the outcome. I thought they would have done a little better. But having said that, your point is taken. I think the PPP will draw more Afro-Guyanese votes than in 2025 than they did in 2020. Just my gut feeling, based on the level of activity, of visible activity in Afro-Guyanese communities, and even visible activity on the national scene. You know, house lots are being allocated. There's always an Afro-Guyanese recipient in the picture. I think they've been very slick in how they promote themselves. Not necessarily in a bad way, but they make sure that everything, that the optics always show this one Guyana or this inclusivity. I don't know what the actual data tells us. I'm not suggesting that the optics are in any way misleading, but the optics are there for us to see, and we see it, and Guyanese will see it, and I think that will chip away at Afro-Guyanese support for the current opposition party. But to the extent to which that will change the traditional voting pattern, I think, you know, we're looking at, you know, between maybe 5% differences, you know, that level, not you know, not even 10-20%, or, you know, those kind of figures.
Dominic, I'm going to ask you about an incident in which you were present, and I'd like to have your take on it. I know you may say, I don't know what this person is talking about that I will quote, but I would still like if you can speculate. Now, the incident I'm talking about is the 2015-2020 government of the APNU, which you involve. Nigel went to meet the Guyanese diaspora in New York, and he is quoted, and I have the words in my mind now.
Yeah, the video is all over the internet. Yeah.
He said, one of our colleagues is the reason why the AFC came out of power. Mm-hmm. I wrote 2 columns speculating who that could be, and I dismissed a whole set of people, and I left with David Patterson and Kemal Ramjatan. But then in my second column, I said it could not be the 2 of them, because one is the deputy leader of the party and the other is in the executive. Could you tell us, for a person who was in the government, Nigel, you said one of our candidates is the reason why we were out of government. He's talking about a formation. He's talking about a series of action of which you were part of. Do you think you want to speculate on who he's talking about?
Well, I would say it's not me, you know.
But I in my column, I said it was not true. I hope you heard the call. Yeah,
I would assume he's speaking about Charandas Prasad. I saw the comment, and automatically I assumed what he's saying is that because of one of our candidates or members or parliamentarians or however it was framed, I don't recall the exact wording, we're out of government. So I assume that that's what he was alluding to. I didn't read anything more or less into it.
But it couldn't be Charandas because he didn't cause them to lose power. The no confidence motion did not result in election 3 months after. The no confidence motion was passed in December 2018, and the election was March 2020. So the AFC had their full 5-year quota. So it didn't cause them to lose power.
I think it contributed. I think it contributed. I think the having been defeated in this no confidence motion, I think weakened the party's standing. So, I mean, I think he was alluding to Charandas Prasad. I mean, I think the easiest thing is to ask him. I don't read minds, I don't know, but I think he was alluding to Charandas Prasad.
You think so?
I don't necessarily think that is true. I think the AFC loss of power, or failure to be reelected was triggered by the no confidence motion, and meaning that a lot of what happened after the no confidence motion, the 33, 34, the challenges in the ruling against the GCOM chairman Patterson, a lot of areas in which the party was seen, or the coalition government was seen not to be adhering to the constitution, not holding the elections within 3 months and all. I think all those things undermined public support for the coalition, and I think more so among members of or supporters of the AFC than the PNC. But I think that's what Nigel might have been alluding to.
Leonard? You think it's Chairman he's doing too?
I consider that possibility, but I also consider the possibility he might be referring to somebody else. But let's assume, right? Let's stretch the imagination a little more. Let's assume that person he was referring to is indeed Charandas. Would you say that's a fair assessment? If to lay this all on Charandas, let's assume that for a second.
No, I think I used the word triggered. I think what Charandas did triggered a series of events that I think led to the coalition itself being its worst enemy. I think if the elections were held within the 3 months after the no confidence motion, I think the coalition probably would have done better in the elections than they did in March of 2020. Just my opinion. But I think because of all the stalling and the delaying and, admittedly, I don't think GCOM was in a position to hold elections within a 90-day period. I don't think so. From the reports that we were presented with, I don't think that would have been possible. But certainly it could have happened before, within 6 months. And I think any time after that 6 months was extra time. And that extra time came at the expense of votes for the coalition because people looked at it and say, "You're making me a fool." You're clearly trying to, you're stretching this thing out unnecessarily, and the country is tense. We want our elections. We want to get it over with. You're delaying this, and then, like I said, the CCJ rulings largely against the government did not help because it showed that what we were purporting was clearly not what was required by the Constitution, and I think that cost us some votes. So I would not, to answer your question, no, I don't think it's a clear or it's a fair comment. I think changing the words a bit, like I said, what Sharon Das did triggered the demise or the fall of the coalition, but I don't think he won was the cause of it. Right. Not at all.
I want to take you back a little to 2020, probably 2019, I think. It was reported widely in the press, Facebook, other places, that a group of people came from somewhere overseas to advise President Granger on his way forward for the next election, for the 2020 election. And it is reported that he received advice to say that they have done some polling and found that the presidential candidate, who is David Granger, is where the focus should be on, and that they should present David Granger and not crowd him, if to use that term, with other candidates.
Not burden his campaign
with other candidates. One, I'd like to ask, can you tell the public who were those people, where they came from, and what weight you put on their advice? Bearing in mind, we spoke earlier of optics, and Guyana has a long tradition of when you present a presidential candidate, people want to know immediately who is your running mate. How can you?
But before you answer that, one of the leader of that delegation met the AFC executive at State House. It's a white guy, and he addressed, I don't know if Dominic Gaskin, Dominic was there, but many AFC persons, Trevor Williams, Michael Carrington, they all said they were there, but they can't remember his name.
I can't remember his name either. It was a white guy. I think the team came from the UK. We did not engage with them at AFC until they made that presentation at State House to the entire coalition, I guess, executive or team. It was fairly a large gathering. It wasn't a small closed door thing. When I say large gathering, I think all our parliamentarians, our party executive members, and the rest of the APNU constituent party leadership and so was there. So that is the who and where they came from. In terms of their assessment, I thought it was a whole lot of mumbo jumbo. It sounded logical and all of that, but I don't know that they did enough work on the ground, if they were familiar enough with the Guyanese situation to be offering that kind of advice. I had heard about them, of their presence here, but I didn't meet them until that occasion. I thought they were going to be doing more of, I guess, what we call analytics, monitoring Facebook and social media and, presenting data based on that. I don't know if that was what led them to their final conclusion or not, but I listened to it, and like I said, I thought it was a whole lot of mumbo jumbo, put it that way.
I would have thought so too, because I wasn't there, but when I heard of what was said, I am wondering if my conclusion is David Granger is really not a politician, because every child should know you present a slate. People look to see who is the Indian on your slate, who is the African, what competence they bring, and all of that. And so, do you think though that may have contributed to the poor showing among Indo-Guyanese? Poorer than 2015?
Possibly. There are a number of factors that would have contributed to that, and it's difficult to even pinpoint whether that was the case, though I suspect it was. But probably, I think if you want to run this country, if you want to be elected to govern this country, you need to present a broader or a broad slate, a balanced slate. People expect that. The differences. The last elections, the last three elections were won by such a slim margin that there's no way you're gonna go to election with an all-Indian or all-black slate and expect to win the election, unless those are the only two options, right? That's just the reality. I didn't place a lot of emphasis on that because I think at the time we were still discussing the Commingsburg Accord with APNU and looking into the future. So we really didn't pay much attention to what they were saying because from the AFC point of view, we felt that, y'all remit, you've given your advice, we have our own position, and we have yet to negotiate an acceptable agreement between the parties for how we're going to contest the 2020 elections going
conflict
forward.
That emerged between Ramjatan and Nagamutu, what weight do you put on that? And responses of people, both not necessarily, well, we can also say ballot box response, but general social response. How do you fix that in the context of the 2020 election time?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I think we took the position, and you would have been part of it too, that I think the party had voted or decided that Kemraj Ramjatan would be its presidential candidate. So that, in our view, was it.
Our operators have signaled our time has come. I would just want to get in this question quickly and then leave you as the guest to your closing remarks. Politics is a surreal horizon. You don't discount anything. I saw the video of the acceptance speech of Nigel Hughes, and he said, we will ask those who have left to come back. It's going to be a very hectic election campaign. If Nigel Hughes say to you, Dominic, you can make a difference, and if President Ali say to you, you have been an outstanding man of integrity, we'd like to work with you. What would be quickly, our time is gone, with your response to Nigel Hughes and President Ali?
I'm not getting involved in the 2025 election in terms of being a party member, campaigning for any party, or in any other way other than as an impartial commentator or observer like what I'm doing right now.
Dominic, thanks for being here. I think our way to signal our time has come. Briefly, anything you want to say? Couple seconds. I hope we can have you back here in the coming week.
Thanks, Freddie. Thanks, Leonard.
Yeah, surely.
Thanks for being with us. Our guest was the iconic, brave, courageous Dominic Gaskin. He said that he is out of politics for the 2025 elections. But it's always nice to have someone with that kind of integrity speak to the Guyanese people. We will see you in our next episode. Catch you later. Bye-bye.